Good evening, everyone. We're here for our special meeting and hearing. I'm Anna Marie Pavlik Rosen, the board chair. Walt Baldwin, our vice chair. Don Hale, member, secretary treasurer as well. Ralph Ledwig, Steve Mason, and James Liebman, our attorney. So we'll go ahead and start with our first item, which is a public hearing, which will be conducted by Walt Baldwin. Sorry.
This hearing will now come to order. I'm Walt Baldwin. I'll be conducting this public hearing. With me today are the board members and staff of the Frankfort Electric and Water Plant Board. We are here to receive comments regarding the adjustment to the cable advertising rate card, which fall in line with the Viamedia partnership, including rates for 26 new networks and a new online advertising structure. This public hearing was advertised in accordance with the regulations for public notification and appeared on Sunday, March 25th, 2018 in the State Journal newspaper. We have asked that you register if you request to speak. If you have not already done so, please register with the secretary so that we'll have a record of those in attendance today wishing to speak. This hearing will be conducted informally. This hearing is being conducted voluntarily by the Frankfort Electric and Water Plant Board in order to accept comments on the above items. Formal rules of evidence will not apply. Both oral and written comments will be accepted. Any and all persons present who wish to make a statement will be afforded an opportunity to do so. If you have a written statement to accompany your oral presentation, a copy of the written statement should be provided prior to your presentation. If you have a lengthy statement, I ask that you summarize your comments. Oral presentation should be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Questions may be asked of any person presenting oral comments today to clarify the nature or substance of the comment. The reasons for conducting the hearing by these rules are so that we can collect information that the board has not previously considered and take it under review. The board may not answer questions as we do not want to make hasty judgments on specific issues that may be of a technical nature. The comment period for this hearing will end at the close of business on April 16th, 2018. Written comments received on or before April 16th, 2018 will be accepted and considered. Before we open the floor to any comments, Harvey Couch will provide a summary. Oh, okay.
Sorry to disappoint everybody. First, I just reiterate that these proposed changes to our rate cards don't affect cable subscribers in any way. Because we added commercial insertion capability to 24 additional cable networks, along with the completely new arm of online advertising, we have to establish rates for these services. Staff is requesting we simplify our rate structure to 2 maximum rates for cable TV ads, one for political candidates at $32 and one for our local core customers at $22, along with a maximum percentage above wholesale for online advertising at 50%. Setting the maximum rates allows us the agility to adjust to fluctuating market conditions while also maintaining a fair ceiling for our local clients. Staff would like to simplify the existing insertion discount structure from multiple criteria to 1 discount based solely on volume with a 50% maximum. And finally, staff would also like to maintain the tariff provision allowing discretion to set higher rates for special event programming, such as March Madness, with the limited supplies of avails. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Have we received any questions? Have we received any internet questions? Or
We have not.
okay.
Any more questions from the board? With that, I'll open the floor to questions from the audience, if anyone has any comments on the hearing. I take that to mean there are no comments, so this will end our public hearing.
So action item number 2 is consider award of bid invitation 1652 for Phase 1 fencing, landscaping, and parking lot demolition to Meyer Midwest Incorporated in the amount of $514,800. Adam Hilliard to discuss.
Yes, the project background, basically August 15th, GRC made their final presentation to the board. After the discussion, staff and member Cubine at the time met with Tanglewood, and they made some changes to the plan. We brought those back to the September 19th board meeting, which was approved by the board to send out for bid. Or actually to send those to planning and zoning. We submitted it to planning and zoning in October. We basically put the project out to bid January 31st. February 21st, we held a pre-bid meeting. We had 3 bidders attend the meeting. Out of those 3 bidders, 2 of them actually bid the project. We had a bid opening March 9th at 1 p.m. at the FPB Service Center. And the 2 bidders were Meyer Midwest and Jackson Construction. Staff would recommend Meyer Midwest in the amount of $514,800, meaning the lowest bid meeting specifications. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
I move we award bid invitation 1652 for Phase 1 fencing, landscaping, parking lot demolition to Meyer Midwest, Inc. for the amount of $514,800.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion?
Phase 1 has 3 components. I think by now everybody knows. It's fencing, landscaping, and the demolition of the parking area. The subject of the parking area is located at the rear of the property at the southeast corner in the back of the property behind the reservoir. I requested some numbers from staff about what it costs to put that parking area into existence and what it's going to cost to now demolish it. And frankly, I was surprised at the numbers. The information I was supplied with by staff was that the estimated construction cost of the head-end parking lot was $419,680. And the estimated cost to demolish the lot and regrade the area is $151,812, for a total estimated cost of $571,492, well over $500,000. So we're talking about demolishing a serviceable, constructed parking area and having expended to build it and to tear it down $571,492 estimated. I cannot abide that. I think that that's an abuse of our customers' money. I'm entirely in agreement with the fencing and the landscaping, and I'm entirely in agreement with everything else about the reservoir that we've done and talked about. But I can't support this, and I would hope that we could back up and get proposals or bids to do the landscaping and the fencing and omit this demolition element. So, and I'll add that when the public looks at this subject, I hope they'll understand that tearing down this parking area is not being promoted by the plant board managers. They are not the moving force behind this. So criticism should not be directed at our plant board managers.
Any further comments?
Obviously, I'm new here, and last meeting I didn't have a lot, but I went back and looked at some of the meetings. And last week, when my first remarks were about the ratepayers and what they had to pay. So when I go back and look at this, and I got the numbers that Ralph talked about. We talked about KYMEA last month. And I know you aren't supposed to maybe cross-match these things, but KYMEA, I think, was supposed to give us a 6-point-something million savings the first year. And I said nothing's absolute, so that's projected. This is absolute. the 440,000, or 400, whatever it was, plus the tearing it down, 150. That's what, 112 for that? That's 112 of what when I put it against the 6 million, approximately. We put the fence back into there, it comes to somewhere around 14-15% of that money. We're eating into that money. I don't have any problem doing things to maybe rectify some issues as it relates to scenery. But I also go back to the question, what do we do for the next neighborhood? You know, what do we do, those trucks that were not there are now at Murder Avenue, and those people are looking at those trucks. I mean, my question is, what do you do for the next neighborhood? I think we should do something, but I'm not sure we should do all of this, because whatever we do here, you're going to hear it again somewhere else. So as it stands right now, I can't support this.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it was a new building project, which is something different than the plant board has done for the last, well, maybe 20, 30 years. Well, this building and the other building, but Murray Avenue, that area was built quite a while ago.
Well, I can counter that by saying, since I am some 60 years old and lived here, the development over there in Murray Avenue hasn't always been just like it is. Now, it may not have happened last year or 5 years ago, but the grid that's over there, when you look from Murray Avenue across, that wasn't there. When you go behind the old shoe factory, that grid, all of that wasn't there. And while nobody may have not complained, I don't know, but I don't see, anything being proposed for those kinds of things. The sightline of the Murder Avenue people, the people on East Main, where to sort of mitigate the issue of all of the grid there, was ribbon going through the chain link fence. That was done back in, I think, like 2016. Because I went back and found a meeting where you talked about what you were going to do to hide some of the develop that grid on East Main. There was a meeting back in 2016 that it was talked about somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000, and that was it. The issue was gone. So all I'm saying is, I want to be fair for everybody here. I want to do, if we need to do something here, that's fine. But to the extent of this, the scope of this, plus the eating of $400 and something thousand for something that was just put up, that is debatable on whether it looks better or worse with it, in my opinion. So that's why I can't support this.
I agree with Ralph. I can support landscaping, particularly after the reservoir's done, but I don't support tearing down the parking area and bringing it back. I don't think that's a good use of ratepayers' dollars, and I think it's important. I've been in Mr. Van Sickle's position many times with South Frankfort Neighborhood Association. I have real respect for neighborhood associations and the role they play in our community. And I hope that the plant board can continue to work with the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association in trying to make the area as attractive as possible. But as Mr. Mason said, I don't see this kind of money being spent in other neighborhoods where we have facilities, and I don't think it's fair to the ratepayers to spend this kind of money in this one particular neighborhood.
Well, I guess my thoughts, I think we've, come through a great deal of improvement, internally with this process. I think that, and also I think that in no small part, that's, we owe a debt to Tanglewood Neighborhood Association because of their efforts to be willing to step up and help us realize that there are better ways we can engage with our communities. And I think as a demonstration of that, I think the process with the Reservoir shows, the learnings from that. I think that, David Billings and his group have done a good job, making folks aware, pulling in input early, and hopefully we won't have these kinds of concerns as we do future projects in other neighborhoods. But, the point of cost is well taken. It's a bitter pill, and it's a lot of cash. But also, mitigating that, we participated in a mediation agreement, and at the end of that mitigation agreement, the parking lot wasn't constructed, and we had, agreement out of those meetings not to have a parking lot there. We moved forward and completed construction on that parking lot anyway, and I agree, it's too much money, but I think the more prudent thing to do would have been to put a hold on that until we knew where this was going. And unfortunately, that's not what happened, and here we are. So it's nobody likes spending money to tear things down, but the neighborhood's made it clear that it's an unreasonable impact on their neighborhood and on their aesthetic, and I have to agree, it's particularly imposing on the houses that are on the immediately adjacent properties. So we've been working on this for almost 2 years, or a little longer than 2 years now, and it seems late in the game to pull the rug out from underneath it.
And to add to that, there were extensive meetings with the neighborhood to see how we could come to an agreement and work out landscaping, fencing, and the situation with the parking structure, which I believe part of the agreement too is that we aren't using that parking structure. So it's sitting there. The neighborhood feels it's an eyesore, and
Well, you're saying we're not using the parking structure?
I believe that's part of the agreement to not park cars
What's the
there.
agreement? I mean, is there a document that
There was mediation.
There was a mediation agreement with Tanglewood, and then there
who
was
signed it?
Rick
Who
Bogrovsky,
approved it?
one of the board members, and I assume Ms. Gray from TNAI.
But what force did that have if the board hadn't taken any action on it?
We did.
Folks, please. I know everybody would like to comment, but that's not the structure of this meeting.
So,
Excuse me.
go ahead.
I had checked with Mr. Liebman on the legal obligation of the plant board to do this. And I saw the mediation agreement. I think it's number 8 on the mediation agreement. Mentioned another document. And that document, Mr. Liebman, would you mind you know what I'm talking about?
I somewhat know what you're talking about, but we did reach an agreement at mediation, was subject to approval by the neighborhood association vote after that mediation, and subject to releases being executed and signed by a whole lot of people, and to my understanding, none of that ever happened. So I don't, the issue is as framed before the board tonight, and I certainly agree there were extensive discussions with the neighborhood association, and some type of an agreement was reached, was my understanding, but I don't know that that's been reduced to any type of legal document.
Right. And so the motion to accept the mediation failed. And that was August 4th, 2016. And then we had a series of meetings with the neighborhood association to work something further out.
But I couldn't find any evidence where anything had actually been signed and worked out after that one 8 or 9 point document
The
to
mediation.
finalize it.
That's correct.
So, Adam, from your perspective, there were a series of meetings and there was an agreement. Do you know if there was any actual document that stated that, or?
Then when we did mediation that day, there was I guess James, I don't know if it was Rick or James, drafted that document, or I guess the Hotgood, well, I can't remember the lady's
The
name.
mediator drafted the document.
Right.
Right.
And representatives of the plant board and of the
TNA.
neighborhood association did sign it that day, and there were more steps that had to occur to bring that into reality, and they didn't occur.
But we had a series of meetings with the neighborhood association to work out what we actually
Right.
got bids on. And so is there any one result of those meetings with the neighborhood association that we could refer back to that you're aware of?
And I guess if I could add to that, it's my understanding that the concerns with the neighborhood association to signing the mediation agreement was the lack of detail around the landscaping. And now they have that detail from the landscaping or approval with the mediation agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one meeting you'd have to go back and ask Rick. It was actually a public meeting. And the only reason I remember it's the meeting that he recorded that kind of got really some people upset. And I think in that meeting it was discussed, and that was, I think it was before, I think it was when Suzanne Gray was still the president. And at that meeting, they basically said that they didn't want to sign that, and it goes back to some landscaping and some other stuff that they would not sign it. The
Right.
actual, whatever James was supposed to produce.
Okay, I did, I think I attended that
You
meeting.
were at that meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
And, but after that, John Cubine worked out
That was
further.
never, any meetings I was with
Okay.
John, that was never discussed as
I
far
see.
as where we left mediation. There was never
Okay.
anything discussed about having James draft anything or sign anything after that.
Okay.
So, but you'd have
May
to.
I make an amendment to the motion? Or is this the wrong place to do that in?
James would
You
answer
have to
that.
ask the person who made the motion.
I'm not particularly, I mean, I guess I'd like to hear your amendment first.
Well, my amendment is to have the fence and the landscaping, but not tear down the parking area. So to amend it to approve the contract for landscaping and the fence, but not the parking area removal.
Well, we had, certainly the original mediation with them. We had a verbal agreement afterwards, although, clearly from a discussion, it wasn't codified in writing. But this was the agreement, I think everybody would agree between Tanglewood and between us that we came to. So I'm not particularly motivated to amend the agreement. I think this is the agreement we reached after 2 years with Tanglewood. And
I'm not saying that's wrong.
I can ask him a question, though, right? No?
You can ask a question.
Why can't we
gonna-
let them speak? I think we need to let them speak.
Well, if it's okay if I ask a question, I'd like to ask Mr. Van Sickle if he has any comment to make.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I don't have all the paperwork with me, but just from a standpoint, I hopefully can try to clarify this just a little bit. What you're voting on is 3 separate issues that were combined into one issue, okay? Now, part of it, most of it stems from an April 23rd, 2016 meeting with the City Commission, where they had a special meeting and we went down there and, asked for some things. And some of those things they agreed with, and they actually requested that moving forward the plant board did, okay? From a standpoint of what we're talking about today, 2 of those things, one of them was the removal of the parking structure that had been constructed. The second one was to work with us, the neighborhood, on the fencing and the landscaping design moving forward for the phase 1, okay? Now, the meetings that Mr. Heller's talking about, those meetings were, we had representatives there. Mr. Tippett was in some of those. Commissioner Roach was in some of those. Plant board staff was in those. Mr. Bannister, Mr. Higginbottom, Mr. Heller, quite a few staff. We came together, and the fencing we actually voted on 3 separate times. The first one that we voted on, came to find out it was a specialized fence, and we re-voted again. The second one we voted on had a brick base all the way across the bottom. Plant board came back and said, we have concerns with some of our underground utilities that are around the property line that's going to affect. The neighborhood, again, we voted on a separate, the third time, another fence, and we came to agreement. Again, we had these meetings in the clubhouse where, after they asked us to revote and go with a different fence, we did with our neighborhood and came back and had an agreement. The landscaping was very much under the same way that it happened. As part of what the City Commission requested the plant board do was to have inside out a local landscape architect design a rendering for landscaping up there. Now, when you guys bid that out, you decided not to use their bid, and I believe it was GRW that actually came up with that plan. After they came up with that plan, you gave it to the plant board, to the neighborhood association. We went back within our association, made some changes. All we did was use the inside out plan as a detail. We don't, we don't have landscape architects and stuff, so we use theirs as a guideline and made some changes. And actually, by the time that we sat down at that meeting in the clubhouse, those changes had already been changed on all the drawings. So that was the second part of this. There was no part after that August 23rd, 2016 special meeting between the neighborhood association and the plant board discussing the removal of the parking structure, because it had already been requested by the City Commission.
And I appreciate you refreshing my memory. I also believe we adopted that list of recommendations from the city. The board voted on that and adopted that list, I believe.
I believe so, yes, sir.
So,
Which included the parking garage.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
thank you, Nate. Okay, so we have a motion, second, and discussion. I think at this point,
I'll ask Commissioner Tippett a question. So what was the commission's influence in everything that has transpired here?
Okay. Of course, I came on after the initial negotiations with the neighborhood association and the previous commission. Part of my platform for running for the commission was property values and trying to hold up property values in the community. I believe we're sitting at 53% rental property in all of our total housing stock. We have very few neighborhoods, what I call intact, owner-occupied single-family dwellings. So what the commission, what I'll do, I'll speak for myself, we wanted to do things that would protect the property values of these owner-occupied single-dwelling family units. So that came about in conjunction with Commissioner Roach and myself, and the mayor and the rest of the commission concurred. And I believe we asked the plant board not to begin construction of the parking lot. And the plant board did that anyway. We asked the plant board to delay that construction. Also, I believe there are 6 directives given from the commission to the Frankfort Plant Board in regard to neighborhood association. And I may be mistaken, but I believe demolition of the parking structure is one of those, or it's in one of those. Okay. I'm trying to be as cordial as I can be. I don't think this board is thumbing their nose at the City Commission. I don't think that's what you're doing. I think you're doing your fiduciary responsibility, and good for you for doing that. But there are overarching reasons why the commission wants this, okay? And it's for the good of the entire community. We're not just singling out special treatment for the Tanglewood Neighborhood Association because we feel like what we do here creates buy-in in the rest of the community. So other folks will want to have their own place to live and keep it up and raise property values. Okay? That's my take on the commission's take. I urge you to pass this. I urge you to pass this. Two of the board members, Mr. Baldwin and Ms. Rosen, worked diligently on this. Kudos to them. It is truly an overarching community issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so we've had discussion, we have motion and second. I think it's time to vote unless there's any other comment. Kathy, would you please call us?
So let's define the vote. The vote is to award this contract, including all three components. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No would be to not approve it. Okay.
Correct.
Mr. Mason?
No.
Ms. Rosen?
Yes.
Mr. Baldwin?
Yes.
Mr. Ludwig?
No.
Ms. Hale?
This is a really difficult vote for me because I vote yes only because I respect what has gone on in previous board votes, and we've got more Tanglewood issues coming up, which the board has previously voted on. And so to be consistent, I will vote yes on this because of previous board action, but I think we very possibly are setting a poor example for the rest of our ratepayers.
Okay. The motion passed, and I would like to mention that this was carefully worked out over a period of years with a lot of thought put into it, both in the neighborhood association and the board. And I think we'll be able to move forward. Okay, our next item, number 3, is a presentation by our Chief Water Engineer, David Billings, concerning the reservoir.
Good evening. It's my understanding that we want to be present at the City Commission meeting on April 16th, so you might want to consider this a dry run for a presentation we plan to give the City Commission. I want to talk a little bit tonight and remind a lot of people in the room some of the details that we've been covering over the last several years. Tonight we're going to talk about some of the public discussions that we have had, the past considerations with respect to the reservoir, how replacement of the reservoir was the ultimate solution, the current design that's been approved by the board and the merits thereof, suggested recent alternative design, and the cost. I've had a lot of public discussions. Every one of these meetings over the next 2 slides are public meetings. We've been talking about this since August of 2016. That's when we directed Strand to pick up the pencil and finish up the design of the reservoir. Had several meetings talking about this. So what does all of this mean? We recognize that this project is visible to the public. We've felt the need to communicate the issues with the reservoir and why it needs to be replaced, and we've been very transparent in the process. But how did we get to this point? I'll recap some of the past options or alternatives that we looked at. Doing nothing was not an option. Repairing it was not cost effective. Neither was moving it. Replacing it was the most cost effective and had the longest service life, and that's what this board and that's what staff asked to do, and that's what we moved forward with doing. So where are we now? We're wrapping up the design of a single 7 million gallon tank that would leave space for another 7 million gallon tank at some point in the future. We're in the process of securing funding. We have submitted documents to planning and zoning in accordance with the Kentucky revised statutes. We have a tentative bid date of November of 2018, tentative construction date of February of 2019, and we have a $4 million budget. Here's the plan view of the approved plan. 7 million gallon tank on the south side, and as you can see, it leaves space for a future 7 million gallon tank at some point in the distant future. Here's a rendered view of the site plan showing a single tank on the south side. Rendered view showing the future tank at some point well into the future. Here's a rendered view from US 60. Same view with the second tank at some point in the future from US 60. Rendered view from Tanglewood Drive. And rendered view from Reservoir Road. Let's talk about the merits of the current plan. It is the least cost option, not only now, but in the future. It has a long service life of estimated at 50 years. It incorporates seismic design, which we do not have in the current design of the reservoir. This single 7 million gallon tank will meet our projected water demands beyond 2060. It has a significantly smaller footprint than what is up there today. I have another slide that shows what the footprint is. So that'll be a little bit future. The 7 million gallon tank, it was determined based on demand sizing. The existing capacity of the reservoir is the top black line. Reducing the size to a single 7 now will meet our demands, both historical demands and also our projected future demands. Here's the footprint that I was talking about. A lot of people see the edge of the roof and see that that's and assume that that's the footprint of the reservoir. That is not true. The footprint of the reservoir is outlined in the purple line. That is the base of the berm that holds back the water. That berm is the structural element that holds back the water. The red circles that represent what we have proposed now and well into the future, that is the footprint of what's being proposed. You can see that the footprint of what's being proposed is significantly smaller than what's up there today. This is true of the berm and also of the roof line. Let's talk about near-term rates. We set forth a path. We have a budget of $4 million for the reservoir, and we have set into effect a rate design that will include $4 million capital construction costs for the reservoir. You can see that our city residential rates are going up, our county residential rates are going up, our commercial rates are going up, all of our retail rates are going up to help pay for this $4 million capital investment. It's been suggested recently we should build 2 smaller 4.6 million gallon tanks. Doing so costs more now. It also does cost significantly more in the future. Let's look at what those costs might look like. I mentioned earlier our budget was $4 million for the reservoir. That's the single 7 million gallon tank. These are recent costs. 2 4.6 million gallon tanks with standard dome is going to cost $6.3 million. That's a 66% increase over the one that's proposed. 2 4.6 million gallon tanks with the lower dome, estimated at $6.8 million. That's a 79% increase in the current design cost. 2 4.6 million gallon tanks with a flat roof is also a suggestion that I've heard. That's estimated at $9.9 million. That more than doubles the cost of the project. It's a 161% increase over the current design. These costs are construction costs, that is site work and tanks. These alternatives design costs down here do not include additional design or construction related services. This is truly just construction costs, site work, contingencies, and tank. I mentioned in an earlier slide we had set in the motion a plan to raise rates to pay for the $4 million estimated tank. That is the gray bar. That's what we estimate our rates will look like in FY21 with constructing a $4 million reservoir. The orange bar, the brown bar, and the magenta bar represent the additional rate that our retail customers would see at the different alternatives. Higher for the two 4.6s with the 1/10 dome, slightly higher for the 1/16 dome, and higher for the flat roof. These are typical residential rates of 4,000 gallons of water with a 5/8 inch meter. Increases from $34.92 to $36.46 a month for every residential city customer that we have. The same is true of county. Goes from $36.36 to $37.96 for every residential county customer that we have, assuming that we borrow the additional funds to do the additional work. The same is also true of our commercial rates. They go up by the same percentages. Those percentages were, I lost it on the slide. This one was a 4.4% increase. I believe this one was a 1.8 and the other one was a 2.2. Don't hold me to my memory. But anyway, you can see that the near-term rate impact does go up based on the selection of what tank that we build today. So what are the long-term costs? Remember, the reservoir site has a 2-tank capacity. Building 2 tanks now that's been suggested will require additional future storage somewhere else. Suitable locations are very limited and very costly. If you recall from the 2017 site alternatives evaluation, just moving that behind Franklin Square where we had the elevation that would work was an additional $10.5 million. The second option was next to the AT&T cell tower site off of Sauer Boulevard. That was $7.1 million. And just moving it across the road to the Berry Hill Golf Course area was an additional $2 million. Those do not include tank. So, in summary, a single 7 million gallon tank, it is by far the least cost alternative, has the least rate impact today. It meets our demands well into the future, which is projected out to be on 2060. It has the significantly smallest rate impact for future storage because of the moving costs, the infrastructure costs associated to get it to those tank sites. And it's the most responsible to ratepayers. I'd be happy to entertain any questions at this point.
Board members, any comments? Just one comment that I had was when you look at higher rates, if we were to build 2 reservoirs, that was the monthly cost, and so those increases would be multiplied by 12 for all those things if you're looking at a yearly increase, and that everyone in the city would be paying that additional amount.
That is correct. Those slides with the rates were a monthly basis, so on a yearly basis it would be times 12.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think it was a good presentation. It shows all the options and what we have gone through to get to this point as far as looking at different ideas. Thank you for presenting that. There are no other questions. We'll go on to our next item.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Okay. Request permission to I'm the chair. I'll call a closed session.
I move to call a closed session to discuss settlement negotiations regarding ongoing employment litigation pursuant to KRS 61810-1C.
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I move that we come out of closed session.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I move that we come out of open session.
Oh, we need a motion for the,
Motion, I guess I'd like a motion to
Yeah.
proceed in accordance with the
Okay.
insurance carrier recommendation.
I move that Hans staff can proceed in accordance with the discussion that we had in closed session.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we can have a motion.
Okay. I move that we.
We'll let you have the pleasure, Ralph.
Okay.
I move that we come out of open session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just get them back in order.